Plenty of sunshine, a beautiful weekend ahead. Amy Jacobson here, Kristen McQuarrie, in for Dan Proft. Thanks for coming in, and thanks for the cantaloupe and the donuts.
Oh, you're welcome.
Was it a pumpkin spice? I ate a little bit of it.
It was an apple donut. See, you get the good stuff. When I am here with Dan, he gets like
What?
gas station crackers or whatever's open at 4 in the morning. But yeah, when I'm going to be in with Amy, I make a special trip to the grocery
And
store.
this is our first time we've worked together.
It is.
And I've got some very nice reviews so far.
Oh, great.
My friend Lois, good morning. You and Kristen are doing a wonderful job.
Thank you, Lois.
Yes, and hopefully she'll call in for open mic night.
Oh, yeah, open mic Friday's coming up.
Did I just say open mic
You
night?
did.
Yeah, we're going to rock it. We're doing this till the sun goes down. Pick a line. Oh, I get so
We have
sappy.
karaoke coming up from
Yeah.
Amy.
Oh.
It's going to be great.
We're going to do that duet,
Right.
right?
Yep, I'm ready.
Which one are we doing?
I think we're doing Neil Diamond and Barbara Streisand.
Oh, you don't bring me flowers?
Yep.
Darn it, that's a good one.
Yeah, I know. It's a good
John Garcia and I sing that all the time.
Really?
Karaoke. I know.
Are you Barbara or?
Yes, I'm Barbara,
Oh.
and he's Neil Diamond. Hello. I've been friends with John since 1995, so yeah.
All right.
Anyway, so speaking of Chicago,
Yes.
we have a guest on that you helped line up and facilitate.
I did. I'm really excited for your listeners to hear from Matt Rosenberg. He is the son of Milt Rosenberg, who many of your listeners will know, legendary WGN. Sorry, I have to name another station.
It's okay.
Okay. Legendary WGN broadcaster. And Matt is a Chicago native. And here's the title of his new book. I like this.
Okay, ready?
What Next, Chicago? Notes of a Pissed Off Native Son. And I get it. I mean, we are pissed off. Amy, you live in the city. I live in the city. We're trying to raise kids in the city. And what I like about his book, and then I'll shut up and let him talk, is that he did a lot of on-the-ground reporting. And he pieces together sort of how corruption in the city has led to just massive failures that have now led to sort of this downward spiral of the city. So I will be quiet and let Matt talk about his book. Matt, tell us why you are a pissed off native son.
Well, there are a number of things that I'm pissed off about. I'm pissed off about the way that we've created an environment where police are not able to do their jobs. We need to readily concede that sometimes the police screw up, and there is a continuing need for important change in the police department. But this idea that police are the enemy, this idea of the DSA members of the Chicago City Council, that we should cut the police budget by 75%, this idea that most of them are just inherently racist, and this idea that there should be no real consequences for actions by the young men who are making our city an almost impossible place to live. All these ideas really piss me off. The spiraling public employee pension debt is another thing that pisses me off. In fact, the timing of Chicago's elections pisses me off in the way that we all think that we can't do anything about this. They're, as you know, in odd-numbered years, buried in odd months of the year, February and April. And what pisses me off most about our city elections is that there's been for years a 33% voter turnout versus 70% plus in Chicago for presidential elections. And we have to think about who votes in those elections. It's mainly public employee union members. And I suppose progressive whites from Bucktown and Wicker Park who keep giving us more and more of what we've got. So, I could go on. There's a great deal about public education in Chicago that's worth getting pissed off about. I mean, take it down to an almost granular level. Look at something that was stuck into the bill in Springfield that approved a gradual elected school board in Chicago. I'm sure you read this, I'm sure it was in the Tribune and the Sun-Times, that they also established a moratorium on school closures. Well, that kind of goes hand in glove with the moratorium on charter school growth. The Chicago Teachers Union doesn't like competition, and the Democratic politicians in Springfield, most of the time, not all the time, because invest in kids is a great exception to the rule, but most of the time the protection racket is built and engineered in Springfield by Democrats. And if schools are under 70% enrollment, it's time to think about it. So there's just all kinds of things, rig rules baked into the system, and people who don't stand up and participate, and the breakdown of the families. And probably the thing that's most worth getting pissed off about is the unwillingness of politicians like Lori Lightfoot to confront the breakdown of the city's institutions, starting with too many families on the south and west sides. And the result is that we have young men, the tyranny of the minority, about 5% maybe of the city's households are making this a gradually more impossible place to live. So I say, if you can't get pissed off about stuff like that, your heart is barely beating.
Or people say they're too busy to care. I've got to look after my kids. But let's go back to the school aspect of this. The moratorium on closing schools. CPS still has not released the attendance records from this year.
Yeah.
They've had plenty of time because we had 347,000 people. And then when this stupid online learning happened, they've lost more than 100,000 students. Either they moved out, high school dropouts, they went to a parochial school, they went to a private school, they went to a Jewish school. And that's to the tune of, again, of more than 100,000. So these schools, there are a lot of schools that are empty, that have lost a lot of, and they've got to shut down because there's no reason to keep the lights on.
This thing that happened out in North Lawndale last year, and, this was one more example of super solid reporting by one of our daily newspapers. Hannah Leone at the Tribune was all over it. This proposal that came from CPS and community leaders, give them both some credit, to consolidate 3 under-enrolled schools into a new, I think they called it a STEAM school because it was STEM with the arts thrown in. And, the 3 schools that were targeted for closure were either under-enrolled or underperforming or both. And instead, we had CTU members marching, calling the proposal literally a hate crime. That was in the Sun-Times. And when you have rhetoric at that level, which is, of course, a common thing from CTU, and which led to the departure of the last school CEO, you just can't win. And, you had people in the community saying, look, I don't care if we have the school in the Jewel parking lot. We're under-enrolled. It makes sense to consolidate. But again, the loud, angry voices won out, and that's what happens in this town. You go back and you look at the NAEP data, right? The 4th and 8th grade testing on the, they call it the nation's report card. You look at the data for the SAT performance and you slice all of that by race. As CPS is not educating Black students and Latino students in particular. Something has gone deeply wrong. So we need more choice. We need actually micro schools, which was a thing that started to happen through public charter schools across the country. It's a radical innovation, and taxpayers pay for it. We need more of invest in kids. We don't need our billionaire Democratic governor trying to cut the private school scholarship program that's facilitated by a state income tax credit. As you guys know, we don't need our billionaire Democratic governor trying to cut that thing off at the knees. At least he was defeated by organized parents, students, and teachers from the private schools who came down to Springfield and, used their influence as lobbyists and convinced Democratic legislators to keep the program alive. We need to turn that 5-year pilot program into a permanent program, and that could happen in 2022 from what I hear.
So we're talking to Matt Rosenberg, author of the new book, What Next? Chicago, Notes of a Pissed Off Native Son. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did you come to this story and deciding to do this reporting as someone who just politically, personally is usually left of center, but then you started to realize that these progressive policies were hurting the city, or do I have that wrong?
If you take the long view in my life, that is correct. I mean, in the 1960s, when I was growing up in Hyde Park, and my dad and people from Chicago know this, had a similar journey. In the 1960s, our family, even me, little 10-year-old kid in 1968, we were definitely progressives and liberals. My parents were hugely involved in the effort against the Vietnam War. There were organizing meetings in our apartment in Chicago all the time. I was forcibly recruited into the Eugene McCarthy for president campaign in 1968, sitting there licking and stuffing envelopes in a little basement office in Harper Court in Hyde Park, going to protest rallies, the whole drill. And yes, over time, very gradually, I moved from being a pretty much standard issue liberal progressive Democrat as a young adult and even into my 30s in Chicago, over time, changing, yes, because you've got to look at the outcomes in the end. And things have just not been going well. So I still call myself a cantankerous independent. But if you look at the big cities in this country, especially the northeastern and northern Midwestern big cities, I mean, we're at the losing end of a competitive struggle, you know. And if you look at and I have an NHL theory here. It's a little bizarre. Let me lay it on you. I'll try and be concise, right?
Okay.
When I was a kid, my dad, Milt, would take me to see the Blackhawks play in the Chicago Stadium. And back then, there were 6 teams in the NHL. Well, you look at where the NHL has expanded to since then, you know, California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, the Carolinas. These are all the places that are eating our lunch right now and eating the lunch of New York City and Newark and Detroit and Cleveland and Milwaukee as well. Why is it that people are moving to these areas? You know, why is it that I meet a wonderful woman on the South Side in a black fraternity apparel store called Nubian Nation, a retired Chicago school teacher, and she says, "You just pack your SHIT and you go." That's what she told me. And she said, everybody's moving to Utah. You know, they're moving to Texas. So I think the problem we have here, again, it goes back to experience versus rhetoric. People are voting with their feet. They're leaving the Chicago public schools. They're leaving Chicago entirely. And very often they're leaving Cook County and Illinois entirely. So is it time to reflect and change? Or is it time to keep doing what we always do?
But it looks like it looks like we are. I mean, I don't know who will emerge as an opponent to Mayor Lori Lightfoot. I think she's going to get a lot of benefit of the doubt because she's been dealing with COVID. But we're facing a city council that has a whole block of open socialists in the budget for next year. They're entertaining universal basic income. You know, once that starts, it's never going to disappear. And you touch on that in your book. Just the need, you know, if dependency is a constant in your life, you need to change it. So throw us forward a little bit. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel here? What do we need to do? And again, you address this in your book. It's why I hope people buy it. But what do we do to get out of this hamster wheel?
I think we start with the dry, dull, and wonky stuff, in part, which has to do with rigged rules of governance. It has to do with the size of the city council. We need to actually shrink it from 50 to 30. We need term limits. We need total reform of public contracting, and I propose something radical in my book, independent decision-making panels from out of town to control all awarding of public contracts, and a series of other governance reforms, most definitely including independent mapping. And I know there's a lot of attention rightly focused now on remapping the wards of the city council. And we're seeing this sort of parochial, you know, sort of racial essentialism. Oh, we need black wards for the black people, and we need Latino wards for the Latino people. And yeah, of course we do. That's worked so well, hasn't it? You know, right. It's just like you want to go and hit your forehead with your palm. But aside from the governance reforms, I would say really, you know, we need to publicize more greatly the success stories like the ones I found on the South Side. We need to be talking about people like the Reverend Corey Brooks in Woodlawn, who's just doing amazing things down there at 66th and King Drive. Recently, 18 black women electricians completed a certified training course. We need loads more stuff like that. We need more parenting classes. We need to hear about the stories of people who turned their lives around completely, gangbangers who are now, on the up and up, working hard, making tons of money and supporting their families. We need to talk about faith and family and, the stuff your grandma always talked about. And I one of the things that struck me, and again, more shards of truth, in the reportage from the Chicago media that until recently, at least, was still going fairly strong, even in a hard time for the media. I think it came out in the Tribune earlier this year when that trove of leaked emails from Chicago City Hall came out. One of them was from an associate of the unfortunate Flessner, right, the city attorney, a woman named Karen Jacobs, who was pretty high up. And in an email chain, she said, we have to reform these communities. We have to push for that. We have to get back to faith and family and hard work and education. We have to actually talk about this stuff. And that came out, and one prominent reporter, I'm not going to mention his name, a guy I admire, who works for one of the dailies, tweeted that little tidbit about reforming these communities and put a string of question marks after those words in his tweet. And I thought, dude, that's not so hard to understand. There shouldn't be any question marks there. Everybody knows what she's talking about.
All right,
And
all right,
like
Matt,
I
we're
say
up
in the
against
book,
the clock here, but the book is called What's Next, Chicago? Notes of a Pissed Off Native Son. Matt Rosenberg, such a pleasure having you on, and good luck with the book.
hey, thanks. People
Thanks,
can
Matt.
find it at Amazon.